My body jerked reflexively, as if jolted by a sudden surge of electricity. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry, my mind racing. It couldn't be my mother. Her entrances were always without ceremony, like a sudden gust of wind that sweeps into a room without warning. I huddled under the blanket, my breath hitching in my throat. Perhaps it was just my imagination, I tried to reassure myself, still rattled by the events of the previous day. But then, there it was again. A knock. Faster, more insistent this time, like a drummer increasing his tempo, building up to a crescendo. Fear and curiosity battled within me. The shadow that had haunted me previously never knocked. It would just appear, a phantom guest that arrived uninvited. So who or what was this? I summoned the courage to respond, my voice barely above a whisper. "Come in." The door creaked open, just a sliver, and in slipped the shadow. It was unmistakably the same as the previous night, but it had undergone a transformation. No longer was it a shivering, vague figure. Now, it had the clear contours of a person, all dark except the fingers that were shimmering with a silver glow. The shadow beckoned me, a silent siren call. It turned away, gliding effortlessly into the living room, pausing to look back at me before disappearing into a crack. I hesitated for a moment. I moved my toes and shifted my torso. This time I was in full control of my body, and it looked like the shadow wanted me to follow it. I moved the blanket and then I followed. This time I wasn't afraid. I felt a strange sense of control, a determination to follow this spectral guide. The shadow sneaked into the living room as I slowly got out of the bed to follow it. The shadow led me to the living room, then through the hallway, and then under the door. The moment it moved under that door, I already knew where it was going. With worry, I looked back and saw the half-closed door of Mom's bedroom. I turned around and silently opened the entrance door. The shadow led me upstairs, its form dancing in the dim light. It stopped in front of one of the apartments. The apartment of the old lady that passed away weeks ago. The doors in this building were sparse, only 2 per floor, and this was one of them. The shadow seemed to sniff under the door, then vanished as if absorbed by the wood. A moment of uncertainty washed over me. Then it hit me. I still had the key that my mother had given me. I rushed back to my apartment, snatched the key from its resting place on the shelf, and returned to the locked door. The key turned in the lock with a soft click, and I stepped into the apartment. It was a space caught in a time trap, filled with antique furniture and old photographs with faded edges. The air smelled musty, tinged with a peculiar metallic odor that I couldn't place. The wallpaper was peeling at the corners, revealing patches of damp plaster beneath. A heavy chandelier hung from the ceiling. The furniture was coated in a layer of dust. The apartment was untouched for weeks, but at night it looked like it had been abandoned for years. Mother said that the old lady had some relatives living in Boston, but apparently no one was in there since the moment she had died, because the apartment looked exactly like that when I was there last. Each footstep I took on the creaky wooden floor seemed to echo through the eerie silence, heightening my senses. My eyes scanned the room for the shadow, and I spotted it next to a plant. It was waving its silver fingers in anticipation. I knew what I had to do. I pushed the plant to the floor. It hit the floor with a blunt thud, echoing in the silence of the room. My heart pounded in my chest as I feared someone might hear the noise at this unholy hour. But nothing happened. Among the scattered plant parts and ceramic shards, I saw something twisted. Fingers. But not the fingers of a hand. These were toes. It seemed like the shadow was jumping with joy, moving fluidly to another pot, much larger than the others. It began to circle around it impatiently, its figure blurring in my sight. With disgust and trying not to look at the floor, I approached the pot. A simple tilt and it tipped over, falling to the ground. Even though I expected it, the noise was a harsh crash that sent my heart into my throat. But what I found inside the pot was far worse. A human skull stared back at me. Its empty sockets seemed to gaze into my soul. A scream ripped through the silence, the sound of my own voice startling me. I ran from the apartment, the image of the skull seared into my mind. I darted into my bedroom and dialed police. I didn't even consider waking my mother. This was a nightmare she needn't be a part of. A week passed since that night, and the police were still investigating the findings. The old lady, it turned out, was a self-proclaimed witch and cannibal. She lured lonely people into her apartment, killed them, and consumed their flesh. The leftover bones and body parts were hidden in the pots, veiled behind a sinister ritual. The revelation sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. People whispered in hushed tones, their faces etched with fear and disbelief. I was mentioned in the news as a brave resident who had stumbled upon this horrifying secret. It was obvious I didn't mention anything about the shadow or stolen bonsai tree. I said that I heard some commotion happening from the floor above, so I decided to check, thinking it was thieves trying to rob the apartment of the resident that passed away not that long ago. When I went up, I saw the door open, and when I peeked in, I saw smashed pots and a human skull, so I called the police right away. The cops never asked further questions, and I was happy that they didn't press on. My mother was deeply affected by the whole thing. First, that she had been good friends with the old lady, and second, that there had been killing happening in the apartment directly above us. That whole story left an even bigger impression on my mother, who was really good friends with that lady. She could not stand to live in the building any longer. We decided to move out of the building, unable to bear the memories it held. On the final day, as we prepared to leave, I took one last look at the building. It was a looming structure of brick and mortar. Its once warm facade had become a chilling monument to the horrors it held. And then, for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a silhouette in one of the windows. An elderly lady, watching us. Was it my tired mind playing tricks, or a ghostly farewell from the building's dark past? I couldn't tell, and frankly, I didn't want to know. Thank you for joining for this short story by R.M.Kh. If you enjoyed the journey, please consider showing your support by subscribing to our channel and giving this video a thumbs up. There are many more stories waiting to be told, and we can't wait to share them with you. Until next time, keep the magic of storytelling alive.